Welcome to the Huddle Within podcast, where we go beyond the surface to uncover the real impact of sports in our lives, whether it's lessons of resilience, the passion that fuels us, or the stories that connect us all. This is where the game gets personal. I am Daniel, a regular sports fan like you, and together we'll explore what sports truly means beyond the surface. So step right into the huddle and let's get into it. What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Huddle Within podcast with your host, Daniel. Today, we're going to be getting into the actual depths of what this podcast is about, as we've gone through all the introductions and my life story and how sports impacted me. So finally excited to bring you an episode that actually kind of resembles the content that I plan out to put out for this show. And I'm really excited to get stuck into it. Today's been a pretty good day, I'm going to be honest. I finally got my hands on a Cocoa Bella chocolate coconut water. It took me about, I reckon, 3-4 weeks to finally get a fucking drink. And just went to my local Coles. I've been going to Woolworths a lot, and they've always seemed to be sold out. But decided today that I'd go to Coles. Despite all my friends telling me to go to Coles, I just ignored them because I don't know why. I ended up going anyway and asked the bloke to see if there was any. And he went at the back and got me a fresh batch. And they were $2.25 each, which is a discount to their normal price. So I ended up getting 6 of them, tried it for the first time, and I got to say, they tasted incredible. They are well worth the hype, and I definitely recommend you trying it out. And I'm not sponsored by them by all means. Hopefully one day they do. Maybe I'll just start drinking them on a regular basis and just put some free advertising for them. But those chalky coconut waters, unbelievable. Have to have them in your fridge. Low in calories as well. Got all the electrolytes you need. So if you're playing a sport, it's actually perfect for you after the game to have that drink to recover. And it tastes fucking good too, especially if you're a chocolate lover like myself. So definitely jump onto those. Hopefully you can get your hands on one. And if you do, try to get 6 so then it doesn't sell out in the future. But definitely try Coles and yeah, give it a go. But once again, that wasn't sponsored. Just felt like sharing that to you guys. And yeah, I think we should probably focus on what the real topic is for today. And that's going to be that athletes are humans like us. And this one kind of resonates with me a lot because I feel as though the media and kind of the generic person, generic fan, doesn't really consider that these athletes have normal human lives like us. Yes, they may probably make a lot more money than us. They're probably much more successful. And they have a big influence on society, whereas we're going through our everyday lives trying to earn and make a living. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're exempt from anything that happens to their personal lives as well. And I think that goes really unnoticed as well. Another thing too is that we don't really see the road to their success as well. And that's, I think, across all influencers. But in this case of athletes, I know a lot of stories of athletes that have gone literally through the run to get to where they are. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. And I guess the purpose of this episode is to essentially, turn the focus on how these athletes are like us and how we can kind of be inspired by them and also have some more empathy when they don't perform on a regular basis. And I'm not going to sit there and say that I've never actually criticized an athlete or a performer before. I've been on the end of a lot of criticism of athletes, and maybe I had some immaturities at times and maybe the emotions get the better of me. But when I get my thoughts and collect my thoughts, I try to really understand that these people are just people in the end. And they're trying to get through life like us. They're trying to deal with so many things. And I think we fail to understand that as a fan. And I think subconsciously, it may just be me, but we might subconsciously be jealous of them as well. We might think, oh, they have everything all good. How can they not be performing? But at the same time, we really don't know what's happening in their personal lives. So that's kind of what I'm going to jump into today. We're going to discuss different types of athletes and different situations as to why I believe athletes are human like us, and kind of coming up with a few explanations, and then hopefully tied into kind of my life as well and real life examples too. So without further ado, guess we can just get underway and kick off with this topic. So the first topic I want to discuss is the unrealistic expectations on athletes. Athletes are expected to perform at an elite level every single game with no little or no room for failure. But in reality, just like us, they are people who experience stress, they experience pressure, they experience family issues, they also experience mental struggles. But the key difference between what separates us from them is their struggles also happen under intense public scrutiny. So unlike regular jobs, they don't get the luxury of performing bad with anyone in the world criticizing them. The only people that I guess criticize us in our regular jobs for doing bad work are our bosses, ourselves mentally, and probably the team around us as well. And I'm sure when you get told off by a boss, I know that I've experienced this, it doesn't feel too good at all. So I couldn't really imagine how bad I would feel if random people, especially if I'm playing for a certain team that have a fan base, are criticizing my performance on a regular basis. And I think the key factors to I guess emphasize is this superhuman illusion that fans and media portray athletes as basically being invincible, and they forget to understand that people go through these problems as well. Like a big example is fatigue. There's a lot of traveling and there's a lot of games that happen within a season, and they're expected to essentially win with everything on the line. Yes, they make probably a lot of money, and that's probably what people will kind of have as a misconception, and essentially say that they should deal with it. And a main one that kind of annoys me is like if they were in their position, they'd be able to handle it differently, which is complete bullshit. Because if you were in their position, you wouldn't be sitting in the couch watching them and experiencing and actually taking your time to watch these athletes. So I think when we separate the superhuman aspect, when we separate the fact that we can relate it to our jobs, we can kind of have more empathy for these athletes and understand that they're not actually capable of performing every week. Like if you look at the NBA, there is a total of 82 games in a regular season, and if you make playoffs, it's up to an extra 28 games. So that's pretty much 110 basketball games across maybe I'd say 7 or 8 month span. And if you think about the magnitude of how many games that is, how realistic is it to actually perform at 100% for 110 fucking games? Especially considering that you have to travel across the whole country every 2 days. You're barely at home with your family. You're barely having some space and rest on yourself. You're most likely sitting in a hotel. There are times where you're on road trips where you're in cities that, let's be honest, some are not as good as others. And you just miss that kind of aspect. And I know it comes with that. It comes with the game, and that's why they play it. But the expectation of them performing 100% is not realistic when we factor those things and we consider those things. MLB is the same. There's 162 games in baseball. And for soccer and tennis play all year round. So if you're on ATP and you want to get a good ranking to go to the Australian Open, you have to play a whole year. There are soccer players that, maybe they're not playing throughout the season, but then they're also needed to represent their country, which is a whole nother pressure in an international tournament as well. So when we factor all these things, and also the fact that there's injuries as well that comes to this, it's really hard to kind of fit all this together and really expect 100% performance. And we don't, fail to realize that most of these players probably have injuries that they're carrying, and they're rushing because they want their team to support. They have a lot of pressure from the world. And I think we just fail to kind of, really rectify this. And I mean, if something happens to them, they're expected to play through it, let's be honest, because no excuse is good enough for a player to miss out on a game unless we really know what is happening. And at times, it's none of our business to know what a player is going through at the time. So I would just ask the question to you. Imagine if you were, I guess, at work, you had your normal job, and a mistake you made or you weren't performing good on the day was put out to the media. You go home, you want to go and relax and set your mind off work, and you're just getting berated in Twitter or berated in the comments. You walk on the street and you're copying abuse. You're at home and your phone doesn't stop blowing up because someone said you had a shit game, and the media, you turn on the TV and the media is just talking about you. It would be extremely hard. And I think when we kind of understand that a bit more, I think we're able to provide more empathy. And if there was more empathy, I think these players would play 100 times better as well. And if we were more extreme cases, imagine actually dealing with a personal loss or something. That would be extremely hard for me to deal with as well. So I ain't saying that, I guess I haven't not abused, but I haven't criticized people's performance in the past. But when I look about these things and when I kind of consider all these different kind of situations, it makes me question whether I should be doing it or not, and kind of just appreciating what they're providing for us more. And that kind of ties into some like real stories and examples that happen. A lot of them are NBA related, because I feel as though with an 82 game season, a lot of these are kind of more common than others. But one being Kevin Love, who in the past opened up about having panic attacks during a game. And if you're having the game and you're thinking you're not having anxiety, that's just unrealistic. Everyone deals with anxiety, everyone deals with pressure, and I think more for athletes than us. We also had Ricky Rubio, who stepped away from the game of basketball in 2023 to focus on his mental well-being. And a lot of people did praise his honesty, which was good, but it also highlighted that athletes can go through mental health issues as well. And one of the biggest ones that I love to talk about is Derrick Rose, who was undoubtedly set to be one of the greatest in basketball. He ends up basically having an injury, and you could see that his career didn't go to the trajectory that he wanted. And yes, a lot of people were empathetic towards Derrick Rose, but there were some that expected him to come out and perform the same again. And what I respected about him was the fact that he did fight through that adversity, reinvented his career to some extent, and especially that was shown when he dropped that 50-point game against the Utah Jazz when he was at the Minnesota Timberwolves. So being able to do all those things, I feel like players like him and players in general deserve more credit as well. So mental health is something that's extremely important. As someone that actually has gone through a lot of anxiety as well in the past, I do kind of relate to the mental health aspect. And I take mental health really seriously. So when an athlete is stepping away from the game of mental health, I can extremely understand their position as well. And it would be daunting to have that expectation to perform on such a world stage, and be scared to really even like call out the fact that they have mental health issues, because it's something that they're not figuratively and literally supposed to have, because they're so rich, they're so successful, they're doing what everyone dreams and loves. So that one is kind of sticks hard to me, to be honest. And I would love for more athletes to come out saying that they have mental health, because when I see someone going through anxiety, it kind of inspires and pushes me to keep going, and makes me feel that I'm truly not alone in that aspect. Because as we grow and as this world develops, mental health is starting to become a bigger issue as well. So always an advocate of that. And if you, as I'll stop to talk about, if you ever feel like you are going through anxiety or you're feeling down, just open up. Talk to someone. It doesn't mean you have to talk to everyone, explain to everyone what's going on, but the best thing to do is just to let it out. Really talk to someone and tell someone that you are not okay. And it's more than okay to not be okay. People go through shit in their lives, and it gets me emotional to talk about it, but you can reach out. Don't be afraid to do it. I've done it before, and it's helped me so much. So I would suggest anyone that's going through mental health that's listening to this podcast, please reach out to someone, anyone that can help you, because you don't understand how much better it is when you kind of let it out to people. But we'll move on. There are also athletes that go through family and personal hardships. Take it as one of the greats, LeBron James, who pretty much grew up without a stable home. His mum was always moving around constantly, and he managed to overcome the struggles to become the greatest athletes ever. And he still gets criticism to this day for not winning enough championships. But if you look at his life in the past, he literally overcame what he needed to do. He grew up with pretty much a single mother who had no education or support, or was able to help him go through those stages of basketball. And he still managed to get out of that situation and become arguably the best player to ever play the game. The same with Ronaldo as well. He literally grew up in poverty. He lived in one tiny room house with his family and lost his dad in his early life. He lost his father when he was a teenager. I'm telling you, if I lost my father, I would have been broken. So him being able to still become a professional and basically overcome the fact that his dad passed away, overcome the fact that he was living in poverty. He literally moved to Sporting when he was like 13, 14 as well. Then went to United when he was like a kid and still managed to become the best player in the world. And he still gets criticism. He's still considered that he's not the best in the world. Messi's the best. And that's just crazy to me. Like, I personally, not again trying to go to GOAT debates, Messi is the best in the world. But that doesn't take away from the stuff that Ronaldo has done. And despite his wealth, despite how rich he is and how successful he has become, he still remains emotionally connected to those struggles. And he still talks about it all the time. And you can see that it extremely affects him as well. We also have Karl Anthony Towns. Now, this one is very hard for me to kind of talk about as well, because during COVID, he lost his mum, he lost his grandma, and people were just complaining about how his physicality and he wasn't good enough, and he wasn't able to help Minnesota Timberwolves get to the next stage. And now, if you do follow the New York Knicks, he's literally looking like the best center in the NBA, and he's overcome all that. And I think we fail to realize the struggles that he's gone through as well, like losing multiple family members to COVID and still needing to play basketball and go through that life is something that's so difficult as well. Another big one for me, as a Wizards fan, was John Wall. He had 2 injuries that pretty much ruined his career. Yes, he made a lot of money, but still, he wasn't able to revive his basketball career after his Achilles and his heel was done. And during that time, he lost his mother in the process, who he extremely loved as well. So imagine going through all those struggles to overcome injury, to overcome adversity, come back and go through that, and then expect to perform well and get traded while doing so. So I think these things we fail to consider. These are real life examples. These are things that athletes struggle with, but we still forget to kind of give them any empathy when it comes to performing. They still need to perform at a high level, and they still need to give us what we want, and that's wins and that's success. Before we get into the next topic, the last thing that I want to mention and talk about are actually athletes who don't get as much money and don't have as much fame as NBA players that we've discussed about, as football players we've discussed about, and that is AFL players, Australian rules football players. The average AFL player makes maybe around 300k a year, for that matter, which is basically what those other athletes make in a week. And here in Australia, they are held to the same standards, same expectations as these athletes that are making millions and millions and millions of dollars. And for me, that is quite scary, because not only are they put up to the level and the same fame as those athletes, they are probably more human than we are, because they have to deal with a lot more things financially as well. When their careers are done, they are well and truly not set for life. Most of them have to study a degree, study a university, and one day, hopefully I'm able to bring AFL players onto this podcast and further discuss their lives outside of footy as well, because I'm sure that it would be a lot more difficult than someone that is living lavishly in a beach house mansion, double story, where they're able to spend as much money as they can. Still not taking away from the fact that they go through issues, but I think it's more common in AFL players because of the fact that they're not really making life-changing money at the same time. They are doing the stuff they dream for, but more people are watching AFL live than basketball players are when it comes to like a real match in a stadium. The MCG holds 100,000 people, and for some games there is pretty much an average attendance of 67,000, and there is games where if you're playing for the massive teams are getting crowds of over 90,000 fans. And these AFL players who probably have moderate lives that make decent money, but they still have to probably pay mortgages, and as mentioned, they still have to go to university, still need to perform at 100% capacity, because they still cop the media abuse that NBA players, NFL players, soccer players, they still cop injuries as well, just like them. But they're not getting the support and the same financial kind of gain as those players. And you see a lot of players also deal with mental health issues, and there's a lot of controversies that go with them. They walk on the street and they are famous, and they have to be careful of what they do outside the season when they're probably not even making the money that they deserve. So I think that's what I wanted to quickly touch up on as well, that AFL players, especially in Australia, if you do see them going through issues, or if you see that they're struggling, we should emphasize with them more because they're probably more relevant to us than we probably think. And I think that's key and crucial to really understanding whether they are indeed humans or not. But again, those are kind of the unrealistic expectations athletes have, especially within those high-paying sports as well as those low-paying sports as well. Like I mentioned AFL, but here in Australia, we also have the A-League, which is the Australian Soccer League, which pretty much earn less than AFL players. And you also got NRL as well, which I'm not too familiar with, but I know that the salary structures are quite the same, and especially in those big cities of Sydney and Brisbane and Queensland, New South Wales, the states, they probably go through the same stuff that AFL players go through too. So again, one day, hopefully I get to put an AFL player on a podcast to further discuss this more and kind of give them their perspective as well. But I could imagine it being extremely difficult, especially when it comes to the salary they're earning as well. And that's where we've touched up, but namely discussing now the role of the fans and media and how we play a massive role of how the athletes are perceived and treated. While many of us support athletes, there's also a culture of tearing them down the moment they struggle. So I think a huge one of this is like the double standards. So being praised one day, they're playing well, they're doing this, and then criticized the next. I think the biggest example that comes to my mind is Klay Thompson for the Warriors. Reason being is that he came back from 2 devastating injuries of an ACL and Achilles. He won a championship coming back from those 2 injuries, and no one talks about it enough. And then the very next season, when they struggled, the fans called him washed after he had pretty much one bad game in that play-in contendership match against Sacramento Kings. So these are things where I think the media play into to try kind of tear down a player. And I think that's just extremely unfair because this bloke literally came back from 2 of probably the worst sporting injuries possible and still won a championship. But instead of actually giving him credit for that, they speak about how he was washed and he went 1 for 7. And I go onto fucking social media to this day and I still see people commenting that on every single Warriors post. And I think, are you serious? Are we really going to judge him on one fucking bad game when this bloke has won 4 championships and is arguably the greatest shooter the sport has ever seen? This to me, these things are just like super unfair. We just see also death threats and racial slurs, which is very common, especially in football, in soccer. We find that very common. One example being Xerxes, who played for Bologna. In Italy, he was copying a lot of racism. And then that also got translated to United. And I want to really talk about Joshua Xerxes here at United as well, because there was one game where he literally came on, didn't have a good performance. I'm going to sit there and say that he did not play well. He came off the pitch. People were cheering that he came off. Think about that, how sad that is. This bloke, he already knows he's probably having a bad game. He's already embarrassed that he's been taken off before halftime. And you have fans cheering that he's come off. This bloke literally got to the club 6 months ago. He came from an unbelievable season in Bologna where he was copying racism there. He was in the Netherlands squad. Wasn't be in the starting lineup, but he got to the national team squad. And then everyone is expecting him to come to a United team that is struggling, that is going through so many issues, which I can't wait to talk about in one episode in the future, and score 20 plus goals and solve all the issues that United have. And that just was just unbelievably, like, there was no consideration, I think. And it was just sad to see because I think, people don't understand the struggles that he went through. Like, he could have had struggles moving into a new city, be it that it's a different culture, different friends, no family around. He's still a young kid. And the pressure to get United to where they were as well is something that's huge. And I think people fail to really understand that. And when you add those things, you kind of empathize with the person. It really isn't Xerxes' fault. It really isn't anyone's fault that has a bad game. There are just times where people just don't show up, and that's part of life. We don't do it either. So that kind of really frustrated me, especially being a United fan and seeing how our own fans turned on our players is just something that's, really disgusting. And it just fuels to, I guess, what makes them better. Like, if someone was telling you were doing bad in something, it's not going to make you do better, not going to make you improve. So that was really, really, really disappointing as well. So we touched up basically on the sports media creating narratives and basically that kind of influences fans' opinions. And just want to touch on that a bit more. It doesn't help when there are a lot of pundits online that just criticize players. And you see it in NBA, you see it also within football as well, where they do everything to tear the names of individuals. Maybe that's because they want to keep their reputation as they were former players, and they don't want them to be in the same spotlight as they do, or they're just trying to get some clout on putting a hot take and stuff. But it really is disgraceful, because you are playing with human lives as well. Another thing to mention is that certain players are always compared to legends in their past. So that's already an unrealistic pressure. And every person that plays is meant to be the next Messi, the next Michael Jordan, the next Kobe Bryant, the next LeBron James, and in AFL, the next Gary Ablett, the next Dane Swan. These things are just extremely unrealistic as well. We also have a clickbait culture where people just put out like hot takes just to get views and clout, and then people kind of just gang up and ponder on people as well. So these are some things that I guess what the media and role play, and it's extremely toxic. And this goes to being the question of, I guess, solving this issue. I think there is ways that we can kind of fix it. How can we be more empathetic as fans? I think before criticizing an athlete, we just need to ask ourselves, how would we perform under this pressure? How would we actually perform if we had our lives taken away from us, if we got traded from a team and we got into a new environment, if we moved countries over a price tag of 100 million and we're expected to perform, if our families are going through issues, if I'm having mental health issues, how can I expect to perform? And how can we expect these people to perform on a regular basis? Because for me, if I think I was going through all that, I'd be in my bed as well. Another big one, and it's probably really sensitive, is how would you feel if you got death threats for one bad day at work? That's a big question as well. I think for me, if I was to get death threats over one bad day at work, I'd struggle to get out of the house. And I know when you have a big influence, there's going to be people that are hating on you. You have to go through adversity, but I feel like death threats is most certainly not on. I think another one is to, I guess, appreciate their greatness while still holding them accountable. So this goes in saying they are not exempt from criticism. I'm not saying that they are exempt from criticism. There are games where they don't perform and they need to know about it, but it has to come in a way where it doesn't compromise with their life, and we need to understand that people go through some certain things. So there are ways to do that, to hold them accountable, but also to forgive and to understand that there are plenty more games and times where they can have a better chance to succeed and do better. Another one would be to also be mindful of social media interactions. So I've got to be careful of this as well. We all do. Just be careful when you're on there. Don't try to abuse them too much on social media. Don't read into too much what someone else is saying. And the first and probably the last and the main kind of thing is just to recognize that athletes are human first before they're entertainers. So like you, like me, they go through everyday struggles in life. They're trying to make it out of this life well. They're trying to do the best they can to get through every day. And they may have probably more money, more success, as mentioned, than us. But at the end of the day, they have so much pressure. And I think everyone in the end just wants to have a peaceful road. So these are some ways where I think we need to consider that athletes are human. I guess there's a lot to cover in here, and I've tried to cover as much as I can on this point. It's always a hard topic when it comes to relating their lives to ours, and trying to see where we can draw similarities. But at the same time, if we do start to, as fans, have more sympathy and empathize and understand the external factors that come from being an athlete, then I think we're able to create a more toxic-less environment, and that will make the product a lot better too. I think a lot of athletes will be better off if we don't have toxicity as well. So just really consider that. If you're one like me in the past that has abused an athlete, maybe now you'll be able to think twice about it, and maybe you'll be able to empathize and appreciate the greatness that these athletes have provided, because it really truly is an honor to see athletes perform at a high level for our entertainment, for our pleasures, and ultimately get the rewards and success that they well and truly deserve in that aspect. But anyway, it's been your boy Daniel. Thank you so much again for tuning into episode 2, and hopefully you guys can enjoy the next episode that I will be putting out, which will be a bit more fun, a bit more kind of engaging, and kind of tying into kind of ways to just improve something. So I'm not going to explain too much or tease too much. You'll be able to see that on the next episode. But yes, it's been your boy again. You've listened to The Huddle Within, and we'll catch you on the next one. That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Huddle Within podcast. I appreciate you for tuning in and being part of the community where we go beyond the game into what really matters. If this episode resonated with you, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who sees sports just the way that we do. And hey, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on my social medias, which will be linked down on the episode below and also into the podcast description. Send in your thoughts or even be part of a future episode. Until next time, keep that passion alive, stay in the huddle, and remember, it's always deeper than the game. Until next time, cheers.